They laughed when she poured the wine. They sneered when she wore a dress that cost less than their appetizers. To the Kensington family, Evelyn Hart was nothing more than a stray dog looking for a golden bone. A temporary amusement for their son Beau, before he married someone of his own caliber. They called her a gold digger, to her face convinced she was desperate for a penny of their fortune. But arrogance has a funny way of blinding people. They didn't know that the bank threatening to foreclose on their estate the next morning didn't belong to a faceless corporation. It belonged to her. And the laughter that died the second the senior banker bowed his head and whispered one word, "Boss." The air inside the grand ballroom of the Pierre Hotel in Manhattan smelled of old money, a specific mixture of expensive floral arrangements, polished mahogany, and the faint metallic tang of judgment. Evelyn Evie Hart stood near a towering arrangement of white lilies, clutching a clutch bag that she had bought at a thrift store 3 years ago. It was vintage, or at least that's what she told herself to feel better. Around her, the women wore silks that whispered when they moved, diamonds that caught the light of the chandeliers, and smiles that didn't reach their eyes. This was the engagement party for Beau Kensington, the eldest son of the Kensington real estate dynasty, and ostensibly Evie herself. But looking around the room, you wouldn't know it. "She looks like she's waiting to take our drink orders." A voice drifted over the ambient jazz. Evie stiffened. She didn't have to turn around to know it was Isabella Vane. Isabella was the daughter of a senator, a woman who had been draped in Chanel since the maternity ward. She was also the woman everyone thought Beau should be marrying. "Be nice, Isabella." Another voice tittered, dripping with false sympathy. "It must be hard for her. Imagine trying to blend in here when your natural habitat is, what, a diner in New Jersey." Evie took a sip of her sparkling water, forcing the bile down. She had been dating Beau for 2 years. 2 years of deflecting his mother's passive-aggressive comments about her quaint job as a freelance archivist. 2 years of his father, Gregory Kensington, ignoring her presence entirely, as if she were a ghost haunting their penthouse. She looked for Beau. She needed an anchor. She spotted him across the room, laughing near the bar. He looked dashing in a bespoke Tom Ford tuxedo holding a scotch. He was charming, handsome, and usually he was her defender. But tonight, he felt miles away. "Beau," she whispered, stepping toward him. As she approached, the circle of men around him didn't part. They were discussing mergers, acquisitions, the language of the gods in this room. "Beau, darling." A sharp voice cut through the group. It was Beatrice Kensington, the matriarch. Beatrice was a woman made of steel wire and Botox. She wore a gown of emerald velvet that cost more than Evie's college tuition. She stepped between Evie and Beau, her back turned to Evie, effectively walling her out. "Beau, have you seen the gift the Vanderbilt sent? A delightful 17th century clock. Finally, something with heritage." Beatrice said, her voice carrying just loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. "Unlike some things that have dragged themselves in tonight." The circle of men chuckled nervously. Beau's smile faltered, but he didn't correct her. "Mother." Beau said, his tone warning but weak. "Oh, don't be sensitive, Beau." Beatrice turned her eyes, landing on Evie, like a hawk spotting a field mouse. "I'm just saying standards are important. Evelyn, dear, is that polyester." The room went quiet. The jazz band seemed to fade into the background. 50 pairs of eyes locked onto Evie. Evie smoothed the fabric of her dress. It was a simple navy A-line. It wasn't designer, but it was elegant. "It's a blend, Beatrice. I think it looks nice." "A blend," Beatrice repeated, tasting the word like it was spoiled milk. "How economical. I suppose when one is hunting for a fortune, one must save every penny for the bait." The accusation hung in the air. Gold digger. She hadn't said the words, but she had screamed them. Evie looked at Beau. This was the moment. The moment in the romantic movies where the hero steps forward, grabs his fiancée's hand, and tells his family to go to hell. Beau looked at his mother. Then he looked at the floor. He took a long sip of his scotch. "Mom, let's not make a scene," Beau mumbled, avoiding Evie's eyes. "I'm not making a scene, darling." Beatrice smiled, a shark baring its teeth. "I'm simply protecting the family assets. We all know why she's here. A pretty face, a sob story about struggling in the city, and suddenly she's attached herself to the Kensington heir, just as the IPO is launching. It's a tale as old as time." She stepped closer to Evie, invading her personal space. "Let me be clear, little girl," Beatrice hissed low enough that only Evie and Beau could hear. "You will never be a Kensington. You are a temporary lapse in judgment, a placeholder until Beau realizes that diamonds don't pair well with pebbles." Evie felt a heat rising in her chest. It wasn't shame, though. Beatrice hoped it was. It was a slow, burning fury. "Is that what you think I am?" "Beau," Evie asked, her voice steady. "A placeholder." Beau finally looked at her. His eyes were glassy. "Evie, look. You know how she is. Just don't antagonize her, okay? Maybe you should go home. Let things cool down." "Go home," Evie repeated. "This is our engagement party." "Is it?" Beatrice laughed lightly. "I thought it was just a party. I certainly haven't seen a ring that meets the family insurance appraisal standards." Evie looked at her hand. The ring was modest. Beau had said he wanted to pick something simple, because he knew she didn't like flash. Now she realized he picked something simple so he wouldn't have to explain a massive expense to his father. "Go home, Evie," Beau said, turning his back to her to refill his drink. "I'll call you tomorrow." The humiliation was total. It was absolute. The room was watching the poor little archivist get evicted from the castle. Evie didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply adjusted her clutch, lifted her chin, and looked Beatrice dead in the eye. "You're right, Beatrice," Evie said, her voice projecting clearly across the silent room. "Diamonds don't pair with pebbles. I just think you're confused about which one of us is the rock." Beatrice scoffed. "Get out!" Evie turned and walked away. The sound of her heels clicking on the marble floor was a lonely rhythm. As she reached the double doors, she heard Isabella Vane laugh. "Finally! Someone call the cleaners, the trash took itself out." Evie pushed through the doors and into the cool New York night. She didn't hail a taxi. She walked a block down to where a black town car with tinted windows was idling in the shadows. The driver, a burly man named Frank, who had been with her family for 20 years, stepped out and opened the door. "Rough night, Miss Hart?" Frank asked, seeing the look on her face. "You could say that, Frank," Evie said, sliding into the leather interior. "Take me to the office, the private entrance. It's 11 p.m., miss." "I know," Evie said, pulling a sleek encrypted phone from her cheap clutch. "I have a bank to run, and Frank, call Arthur Pendleton. Tell him to pull the Kensington file, all of it." The morning after the party, the Kensington household was in high spirits. The Evie problem had been handled. Beatrice sat at the head of the long dining table in their Upper East Side penthouse, buttering a croissant with the satisfaction of a general who had just won a war. Gregory Kensington, a man whose face was permanently etched with the stress of maintaining a facade, was reading the Financial Times. "I told you she would fold," Beatrice said, sipping her mimosa. "These girls have no spine. One little push and they scurry back to the gutters." Beau walked in, looking hungover. He wore a silk robe and rubbed his temples. "Did you have to be so brutal, Mother? She hasn't answered my texts." "Good," Gregory grunted from behind the paper. "Focus on the vain girl, Isabella. Her father chairs the zoning committee. We need that approval for the Hudson Yards project, or we're underwater, Beau." "I liked Evie," Beau muttered, pouring himself coffee. "She was easy, uncomplicated." "She was a liability," Beatrice snapped. "And poor. We don't do poor, Beau. Not now. Not with the liquidity issues we're having." Gregory lowered the paper. "Speaking of liquidity, have you heard from the bank the bridge loan was supposed to clear this morning?" "I'm sure it's fine." Beau waved a hand. "It's Centurion Holdings. We've been banking with them for 3 generations. Old man Pendleton loves us." "Call them," Gregory ordered. "I don't like the silence." Beau sighed and pulled out his phone. He dialed the direct line for Arthur Pendleton, the senior vice president of Centurion Holdings, a boutique private bank that catered only to the ultra-elite. Centurion was exclusive. You didn't apply for an account, you were invited. And the Kensingtons had been borrowing heavily against their assets to fund their lavish lifestyle and failing real estate ventures. "Mr. Pendleton," Beau said, putting on his charm voice. "Beau Kensington here. Just calling to confirm the transfer of the $10 million for the operational costs. The contractors are getting antsy." There was a pause on the other end. A long, cold silence. "Mr. Kensington." Arthur Pendleton's voice was dry like shifting sand. "I'm afraid that transfer has been flagged." "Flagged?" Beau laughed nervously. "Flagged for what?" "We're the Kensingtons." "Yes, I am aware," Arthur replied. "However, there has been a review of your collateral. The board has decided to freeze all outgoing credit lines effective immediately. Furthermore, we are issuing a recall on the outstanding principal of the Tribeca loans, due in full within 48 hours. Beau dropped his coffee spoon. It clattered loudly on the china. "Recall." Beau's voice cracked. That's $40 million, Arthur. You can't recall that on a whim." "It is not a whim, Mr. Kensington. It is a clause in your contract. Section 4. Paragraph B. In the event of reputational risk or instability, the bank reserves the right to accelerate payment." Reputational risk. Beatrice stood up, snatching the phone from Beau. "Arthur, this is Beatrice Kensington. How dare you? We were at the Pierre last night. We are the pillars of this city. What risk?" "Mrs. Kensington," Arthur said, his tone unbothered. "The decision comes from the top. The chairman has taken a personal interest in your portfolio." "The chairman?" Beatrice blinked. "Nobody has seen the chairman of Centurion in 10 years. Everyone knows he's a recluse living in the Swiss Alps." "Things change, Mrs. Kensington. The chairman is in New York, and the chairman requests a meeting, today, 2:00 p.m. at the headquarters." "We will be there," Gregory shouted into the speakerphone. "And we will be bringing our lawyers." "Bring whoever you like," Arthur said, and the line went dead. The silence in the penthouse was heavy, suffocating. The air conditioning hummed, but sweat began to bead on Gregory's forehead. 40 million, Gregory whispered. If they call that loan, we're insolvent. We lose the buildings. We lose the penthouse. We lose everything." "It's a mistake," Beatrice insisted, her hands trembling. "It's a glitch, or a power play. We go down there, we remind them who we are, and we fix this." Bo sat heavily in the chair. Arthur sounded different. Scared. "He's a glorified accountant," Beatrice scoffed, smoothing her silk robe, though her face was pale. "I'll wear the red suit, the Valentino. We need to look like we don't need their money." Meanwhile, across the city, in a building that pierced the skyline like a shard of black obsidian, Evelyn Hart sat in a corner office that spanned the entire top floor. She wasn't wearing the polyester blend dress today. She wore a bespoke white suit, tailored to perfection, sharp enough to cut glass. Her hair, usually pulled back in a messy bun, was blown out, sleek and straight. On her wrist sat a Patek Philippe watch that was worth more than the Kensington's entire car collection. Arthur Pendleton, a man in his 60s with silver hair and a posture that screamed deference, stood in front of her desk. "They are panicking, boss," Arthur said softly. Evie swiveled her chair to look out at the city. She could see the park from here. She could almost see the Pierre Hotel. "Good," Evie said. "Did they threaten legal action?" Gregory shouted about lawyers. Beatrice mentioned her social standing. Evie smiled. It wasn't a happy smile. It was the smile of a hunter checking a trap. "They have no idea, do they, Arthur? None. They believe you are Evelyn Hart, the freelance archivist from New Jersey who struggles to pay rent." "Technically, I am an archivist," Evie mused, picking up a heavy fountain pen. "I archive bad debts, and I archive people who think they can treat others like dirt because of a number in a bank account." She stood up and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. "My father built Centurion Holdings on a handshake and honor, Arthur. He hated people like Gregory Kensington. People who borrow and borrow to paint a pretty picture while the foundation rots. The Kensingtons are scheduled for 2:00 p.m. Arthur checked his tablet. "Shall I prepare the boardroom?" "Yes, the big one. The one with the long table." "And how do you wish to be introduced?" Evie turned back to him. Her eyes were cold, hard flint. "Don't introduce me, Arthur. Let them sit. Let them sweat. Let them wait for the old man from the Swiss Alps. And when I walk in, don't say a word." Arthur nodded, a glimmer of excitement in his eyes. He had watched the Kensingtons treat Evie like a servant for 2 years. He had held his tongue when Bo called to check on trust funds, while Evie sat in the lobby waiting for him. He was ready for this. "Very good, boss." Evie looked at the digital clock on the wall. 4 hours. 4 hours until the Kensington dynasty walked into the lion's den, expecting to fight a lamb, only to realize they were the ones on the menu. "Oh, and Arthur, yes, boss. Make sure there's water on the table. Tap water, in plastic cups." Arthur suppressed a smile. Understood. To understand why a woman worth billions was shopping at thrift stores and dating a man who treated her like an accessory, you have to understand the will of Elias Hart. Elias wasn't just a banker. He was a legend. He was the kind of man who moved markets with a whisper. When he died 4 years ago of a sudden stroke, the Wall Street Journal ran a 4-page obituary. He left everything to his only daughter, Evelyn. But Elias was a paranoid genius. He knew that wealth was like blood in the water. It attracted sharks. On his deathbed, he had grabbed Evie's hand, his grip surprisingly strong. "Evie," he had rasped, "promise me. For 3 years you don't touch the helm publicly. You let the board run the day-to-day. You live a normal life. Find out who your friends are before they know what you're worth. Because once they know, you'll never know the truth again. Evie promised. She had graduated top of her class from Wharton, but she buried her degree in a storage locker. She created the persona of the struggling archivist. It wasn't hard. She loved history. She loved books, and it gave her a reason to be in the city without flashing cash. Then she met Beau Kensington. He was charming, funny, and seemed to listen to her. When they first met at a gallery opening, she had snuck in for the free wine he had defended her when a waiter spilled a tray on her. He seemed different from the other trust fund kids. But over 2 years the cracks appeared. The small comments about her clothes. The way he'd leave her out of conversations with his important friends. The way he let his mother Beatrice treat her like a stain on the carpet. Evie stayed because she wanted to believe in him. She wanted to believe that if she just loved him enough, the good Beau would win. She was waiting for the 3-year mark, which was next month, to reveal her secret, hoping they would laugh about it together on a private jet to Paris. But last night at the Pierre Hotel, the illusion shattered. Beau wasn't a victim of his family's snobbery. He was a willing participant. He didn't love Evie the person. He tolerated Evie the project. Now, sitting in her office, Evie looked at the dossier on the desk. The Kensington portfolio. It was a disaster. Gregory Kensington had leveraged their flagship properties in Midtown to buy a failing resort in the Bahamas. Beatrice had drained the company accounts to fund her spot on the gala committee boards. Beau had lost $3 million trying to launch a tech startup that produced nothing but noise. They were drowning. And for years, Arthur Pendleton had been keeping them afloat, approving bridge loans and extensions, because he knew Evie was dating their son. He was protecting her boyfriend's family without her even asking. "No more," Evie whispered. She picked up the phone. "Arthur, get the legal team ready. I want the foreclosure papers drafted for the Kensington estate in the Hamptons, and the penthouse." "The penthouse boss," Arthur's voice came through the intercom. "That's their primary residence." "I know," Evie said, her voice devoid of emotion. "They like to talk about standards. Let's see how their standards hold up in a rental in Queens." She stood up and walked to the private bathroom attached to her office. She looked in the mirror. The girl who cried in the taxi last night was gone. The woman staring back was Elias Hart's daughter. She applied a coat of crimson lipstick. It was war paint. The lobby of Centurion Holdings was designed to make you feel small. The ceilings were 40 feet high, supported by pillars of black marble. The floor was so polished you could see your own fear reflected in it. At 1:55 p.m., the Kensington family arrived. Beatrice swept in first, wearing her red Valentino suit and oversized sunglasses, clutching a crocodile skin Hermes Birkin bag like a shield. Gregory followed, sweating through his shirt, despite the chill in the air, carrying a briefcase stuffed with documents that were mostly useless. Beau brought up the rear, looking pale and nauseous. They approached the reception desk. A young woman with glasses sat there, typing efficiently. "We are here to see the chairman," Beatrice announced, tapping her manicured nails on the marble counter. "The Kensingtons. We have a 2:00 p.m. The receptionist didn't look up immediately. She finished typing a sentence, then slowly raised her eyes. "Name. I just told you," Beatrice snapped. "Kensington. Gregory and Beatrice. And Beau. ID, please." "Excuse me." Beatrice laughed, a harsh barking sound. "We have been banking here for 30 years. Arthur Pendleton knows who we are." Call him. Standard security protocol, ma'am. ID. Beatrice huffed, digging into her bag. She threw her license on the counter. Gregory and Beau did the same. The receptionist took her time, scanning them, checking the screens, then handing them back. Take the elevator to the 41st floor, boardroom B. Finally, Beatrice snatched her ID back. Service in this city has gone to hell. They rode the elevator in silence. The numbers ticked up. 10, 20, 30. Remember, Gregory hissed as they neared the top. We are strong. We threaten to move our accounts to J.P. Morgan if they don't back off. We remind them of the fees we've paid over the years. Right, Beau mumbled. He was checking his phone. Still no reply from Evie. He felt a pang of guilt, but mostly annoyance. Why does she have to be so dramatic, he thought. If she just answered, I could vent about this stress. The doors opened on the 41st floor. It was quiet. Too quiet. There were no busy analysts running around. Just a long, glass-walled corridor leading to a massive set of double doors made of dark oak. Arthur Pendleton was waiting outside the doors. He wasn't smiling. Arthur, Gregory boomed, putting on a fake smile and reaching out a hand. Good to see you, old sport. Listen, this whole misunderstanding is... Arthur didn't take the hand. He simply clasped his own hands behind his back. Mr. Kensington, Mrs. Kensington, please go inside. The chairman will be with you shortly. Arthur, stop this charade, Beatrice said, stepping closer. Who is this chairman? Is it old Elias Hart's brother? Is it some European investor? Just tell us, so we know who we're charming. Inside, please. Arthur opened the door. The boardroom was impressive. A table long enough to seat 20 people dominated the room. One entire wall was glass overlooking the entirety of Manhattan. But the room was empty. The Kensingtons filed in. Arthur pointed to 3 chairs on the left side of the table. Please have a seat. Where is he? Gregory asked, looking around. Shortly, Arthur said, and then he did something that made Beatrice's blood boil. He placed 3 plastic cups on the table, then a plastic pitcher of lukewarm tap water. Refreshments, Arthur said deadpan. Plastic. Beatrice gasped. We are drinking out of plastic. Budget cuts. Arthur said, his eyes twinkling dangerously. We're reviewing all risky expenditures. I'm sure you understand. Arthur turned and walked out, closing the heavy door with a solid thud. The Kensingtons were left alone. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Gregory paced the room. This is a power play. Classic negotiation tactic. Make us wait. Make us sweat. It's working, Beau muttered, loosening his tie. Dad, what if they really call the loan? We don't have 40 million liquid. We don't even have 4. Shut up, Beau, Beatrice snapped. She was checking her makeup in her compact mirror, but her hand was shaking. We sell the yacht. We sell the Aspen house. We stall. 30 minutes. The room grew warmer. Or maybe it was just their anxiety. The pitcher of water sat untouched, mocking them. I need a drink, Gregory groaned. A real drink. Don't you dare touch that tap water, Beatrice hissed. Have some dignity. Suddenly the handle of the far door turned. The Kensingtons froze. Gregory buttoned his jacket. Beatrice sat up straight, fixing a frozen smile on her face. Beau ran a hand through his hair. This was it. The chairman. The recluse. The man who held their lives in his hands. The door opened. Arthur Pendleton walked in first. He didn't sit. He stood by the door, holding it open. Please rise. Arthur announced, his voice ringing with authority. For the majority shareholder and CEO of Centurion Holdings. Gregory and Beatrice stood up out of instinct and respect for the title. Beau scrambled up beside them. They watched the door, expecting an elderly man in a wheelchair, or perhaps a severe Swiss banker in a grey suit. Instead, a woman walked in. She wore a white suit that glowed against the dark wood of the room. Her heels clicked with a rhythmic, predatory precision on the floorboards. She carried nothing. No files, no phone. She didn't need to. She walked to the head of the table, the light from the window obscuring her face for a moment. She stood behind the massive leather chair at the head of the table. Beatrice squinted. The silhouette looked familiar. "Good afternoon," the woman said. The voice. Beau felt his knees buckle. He knew that voice. He had heard that voice whisper, "I love you," and pass the popcorn. The woman stepped forward out of the glare. It was Evie. But it wasn't the Evie they knew. This wasn't the girl in the polyester dress. This was a titan. Her eyes were sharp, her posture commanded the room, and the air around her seemed to crackle with power. There was a silence so profound it felt like the oxygen had been sucked out of the room. Beatrice's mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked like a fish on a dock. Gregory's eyes bulged. He looked from Evie to Arthur, then back to Evie. "Evelyn," Beau whispered, his voice cracking. What are you doing here? Did you get a job here?" Beatrice let out a breathy, nervous laugh. "Oh, thank God. For a second I thought. Evie, darling, tell them to bring us some coffee. And explain to your boss that we've been waiting for Arthur," Evie said, cutting Beatrice off without even looking at her. She kept her eyes locked on the view of the city. "Yes, boss," Arthur responded instantly. The word hung in the air. "Boss." Beatrice stopped laughing. "Boss." Gregory repeated, the color draining from his face. "Arthur, why are you calling her that?" Evie slowly turned her head. She looked at Beatrice, then Gregory. Then finally she rested her gaze on Beau. "Because Gregory," Evie said, her voice cool and smooth as liquid nitrogen, "I own the bank." You own..." Beatrice stammered. She grabbed the back of her chair for support. "That's impossible. You're a librarian. You live in a studio apartment in Jersey." "Archivist," Evie corrected calmly. She pulled the heavy leather chair out and sat down. She didn't offer them a seat. They remained standing, looking like scolded schoolchildren. "And I own the apartment building. I just choose to live in Unit 4B because the light is better." She gestured to the empty chairs. "Sit. You look tired." They collapsed into the chairs. Beau was staring at her as if she were an alien who had just unzipped a human suit. "Evie," Beau said, "is this a joke if you have money? Why didn't you tell me? Why did you let me pay for dinner? Why did you let my mother—" He trailed off, the memory of the previous night crashing down on him. "Let your mother humiliate me," Evie finished for him. She clasped her hands on the table. "I didn't let her do anything, Beau. She showed me exactly who she is. And you showed me exactly who you are." "I was protecting you," Beau protested, though his voice was weak. "You were protecting your inheritance," Evie said, "which ironically is now currently in my hands." She pressed a button on the sleek console built into the table. A large screen on the wall flickered to life. It displayed a complex web of numbers, assets, and liabilities. The header read, "Kensington Global Entities. Solvency status critical." Let's review, Evie said, picking up a laser pointer. Your real estate holdings in Tribeca. She circled a red number. Currently leveraged at 110%. You owe more than they are worth. The Bahamian Resort. She circled another number. Bleeding cash, $2 million a quarter. And your lifestyle. She looked at Beatrice. Your Amex Black Card issued by this bank has a balance of $400,000, mostly couture jewelry and, what is this, a $20,000 dog birthday party. Beatrice flushed a deep, ugly red. That is private financial information, Gregory shouted, finding a shred of his old bluster. You can't display this. I'll sue you for breach of privacy. You signed a waiver when you took the loan. Gregory, Arthur spoke up from the corner. Section 12. The bank reserves the right to audit and review financials in the presence of the borrowers. I am the bank, Evie said simply. She stood up and walked around the table, approaching Gregory. He shrank back. For 2 years, Gregory, you ignored me. You looked right through me at dinners. You didn't even know my last name until the engagement invitations were being drafted. Hart. Does it ring a bell? Gregory's eyes widened. Hart. Elias Hart, my father, Evie said. Gregory looked like he was going to have a heart attack. Elias Hart is dead. He was a shark. A monster. He was a brilliant man who taught me one very important thing, Evie said, leaning down so her face was inches from Gregory's. Never invest in a depreciating asset. She straightened up and looked at the family. And you three, you are depreciating assets. Evie, please, Bo pleaded, reaching across the table to grab her hand. She pulled it away sharply. We can work this out. I love you. You know I do. Last night, I was drunk. I was stressed. I was going to call you today and apologize. Were you? Evie asked. Or were you going to call me after you secured the loan extension to tell me that we needed to take a break until I learned to fit in? Bo went silent. That was exactly what he had planned. Here is the reality, Evie said, walking back to the head of the table. I'm recalling the loans, all of them, the $40 million, plus the interest, plus the penalties for the covenant breaches on the Tribeca properties. We can't pay that, Beatrice shrieked. We'll be ruined, we'll be homeless. Not homeless, Evie said thoughtfully. I believe you still own a small cottage in upstate New York, the one you call the servants' shack. It's fully paid off. You could live there. You can't do this. Beatrice was crying now, mascara running down her face. The Iron Lady had melted. We are Kensingtons, and I am a Hart, Evie said. And unlike you, I pay my debts, and I collect them. She turned to Arthur. Arthur, initiate the seizure of the assets, freeze the accounts, and cancel Mrs. Kensington's black card immediately. I believe she has a shopping trip planned for tomorrow. Done, Arthur said, tapping on his tablet. No. Beatrice screamed. She lunged for her bag, grabbing her phone. I'm calling the senator. I'm calling the mayor. Go ahead, Evie said. Ask them if they want to bail out a family that has been defrauding investors for 5 years. Beatrice froze. Defrauding. We audited the books, Beatrice, Evie said, her voice dropping to a whisper. The Bahamian Resort isn't just failing. It's a shell company. Gregory has been funneling loan money into offshore accounts to hide it from the IRS. That's federal fraud. Gregory put his head in his hands and sobbed. I didn't know, Bo whispered, looking at his father. Dad, you said it was a tax strategy. It was, Gregory wailed. It was embezzlement, Evie corrected. Now here is the choice. The room went deadly silent. Option A. Evie held up one finger. I hand this file to the FBI. Gregory goes to prison. The assets are seized by the government. You lose everything, and the Kensington name becomes synonymous with felony. Beatrice covered her mouth. Option B. Evie held up a second finger. You sign over the deeds to the penthouse, the Hamptons estate, and the Tribeca buildings to Centurion Holdings voluntarily. You declare personal bankruptcy. You move to the cottage upstate, and you disappear from New York society. You never speak my name again. You never mention you knew me. And Dad? Beau asked. If you sign today, I won't send the file to the FBI. I'll absorb the loss as a bad debt write-off. Gregory stays a free man. A poor man, but a free one. Evie looked at her watch. You have 5 minutes to decide. I have a board meeting at 3 o'clock. She turned her back on them and looked out the window. Behind her, the sound of the Kensington dynasty collapsing was softer than she expected. It was just the sound of a pen scratching on paper, and the quiet sobbing of a woman who realized her polyester nightmare had just become her reality. The 5 minutes it took for Gregory Kensington to sign away his family's legacy felt longer than the previous 30 years of building it. When the pen finally lifted from the paper, leaving a shaky signature on the dotted line of the asset surrender agreement, the air in the boardroom changed again. It wasn't tense anymore. It was just empty. Arthur Pendleton stepped forward and efficiently collected the documents, placing them into a secure folio. It is done, Arthur said. He looked at his watch. It is now 3:05 p.m. Security is currently waiting in the lobby of your penthouse and at the Hamptons estate. They have instructions to supervise your packing. You have 24 hours to vacate the premises. Only personal items. No artwork, no furniture, and certainly none of the jewelry that was insured under the family policy. That is now bank property. Beatrice made a sound like a wounded animal. 24 hours? But where will we go tonight? The cottage hasn't been opened in years. There's no heat, no water. Evie didn't turn away from the window. There is a Motel 6 off the NJ Turnpike. I hear their rates are very reasonable. Roughly the cost of one of your appetizers at the Pierre. Evie. Beau said, his voice hollow, standing up unsteadily. You can't just kick us to the curb like this. We had something. Doesn't that mean anything? Evie finally turned. Her expression wasn't angry. It was worse. It was profoundly bored. We had a transaction, Beau. You provided a distraction, and I provided the illusion of an easy target. The transaction is complete. You're dismissed. Arthur opened the door, and 2 large security guards in dark suits stepped in. They weren't aggressive, but their presence was an undeniable punctuation mark on the meeting. The Kensingtons left the boardroom of Centurion Holdings not as masters of the universe, but as refugees. They didn't take the elevator. Arthur insisted they take the service stairs down 3 flights to a side exit, so as not to disturb the actual clients in the lobby. The downfall was swift and brutal. By 5 o'clock p.m. the news broke. Not the whole story, Evie kept her name out of it for now, but the headlines screamed Kensington Empire collapses. Bank forecloses on all properties. Family destitute. The eviction the next morning was a spectacle. Beatrice Kensington had spent her life trying to get into the society pages of the New York Times. She finally made the front page, though not the way she intended. A photo went viral. Beatrice, sitting on a Louis Vuitton trunk on the sidewalk outside her former building, wearing sweatpants, her hair a mess, weeping into her hands while movers carried out a priceless Ming vase that now belonged to Evie Hart. Gregory sat beside her on the curb, staring blankly at the traffic, looking 20 years older than he had 2 days prior. Beau wasn't in the photo. He was busy arguing with a tow truck driver who was hooking up his Aston Martin. The society friends who had fawned over them at the engagement party, their phones went straight to voicemail. Isabella Vane, the senator's daughter, gave a quote to page 6. "It's tragic, really. But one always suspected their foundation was shaky. My family is just relieved Beau didn't drag us down with them." Evie watched it all from her office. She didn't feel the rush of vindication she expected. She just felt a quiet sense of order being restored. The universe had been out of balance, tilted in favor of the cruel and the fake. She had simply set it right. She picked up her phone and called Arthur. "Are they out?" "Yes, boss. They are currently in a rented U-Haul headed upstate. It seems Beau is driving." "Good." Arthur released the press statement. "It's time." An hour later, the financial world ground to a halt. A new headline dominated every screen on Wall Street. The ghost of Elias Hart returns. Daughter Evelyn Hart revealed as owner of Centurion Holdings, the archivist who broke the Kensingtons. The photo they used was one Arthur had taken of her that morning, standing by the window in her white suit, looking like the queen of the city. Her phone, which had been silent for 2 years, suddenly exploded with calls from people who hadn't spoken to her since college, from art galleries begging for donations, from the very people who had sneered at her polyester dress just 48 hours ago. She let it ring. She had work to do. 3 months had passed since the collapse of the Kensington dynasty, and winter had settled over the tri-state area with a vengeance. It was a wet, biting cold that seeped through the cracks of old window frames and settled into the bones. Evelyn Hart sat in the back booth of Sal's Diner, a small retro establishment in New Jersey that smelled permanently of frying bacon and coffee grounds. This was her sanctuary. Despite the fact that Forbes had recently put her face on their cover under the headline "The Silent Shark," and despite the fact that her net worth was now public knowledge, Evie still drove across the bridge every Sunday morning for blueberry pancakes. She was dressed in a thick, oversized cashmere sweater and leggings, her hair pulled back in a messy clip. On the table in front of her wasn't a society magazine, but a stack of dossiers for Centurion Holdings' new charitable arm. She was reviewing applications for small business grants, bakeries in the Bronx Mechanics in Queens, the kind of people her father had respected, the kind of people Beatrice Kensington wouldn't have let use her bathroom. The bell above the diner door jingled violently as a gust of wind blew it open. Evie didn't look up immediately. She was engrossed in a proposal for a community garden in Harlem. But then the air in the diner seemed to shift. The usual Sunday morning chatter died down slightly, not out of reverence, but out of curiosity. She felt a shadow fall across her table. "I had a feeling you'd be here." The voice was familiar, but it was stripped of its polish. It lacked the smooth, arrogant cadence of the Hamptons cocktail circuit. It was raspy, tired, and laced with hesitation. Evie slowly lowered her red pen. She looked up. Beau Kensington stood there. If she hadn't known him for 2 years, she might not have recognized him. The golden boy of the Upper East Side was gone. In his place was a man who looked like he had aged a decade in 90 days. He was thinner, his cheekbones jutting out sharply against pale skin that hadn't seen a tanning bed in months. He wore a denim jacket that was frayed at the cuffs. Not the designer, distressed look, but actual wear and tear. His hands resting nervously on the back of the empty booth seat were chapped, the knuckles raw and red. "Hello, Bo," Evie said. Her voice was calm, devoid of malice. It was the tone one might use with an old acquaintance they hadn't expected to see. "Can I sit all?" Bo asked. He glanced around the diner nervously, as if expecting a trap door to open beneath him. "I promise I'm not here to cause a scene." Evie studied him for a long moment. She saw the dark circles under his eyes, the way his shoulders slumped. The anger she had felt in the boardroom 3 months ago had evaporated, replaced by a distant pity. "Sit," she said, gesturing to the vinyl seat opposite her. Bo slid in. He didn't take off his jacket, as if he couldn't quite get warm. He clasped his hands together on the table, trying to stop them from shaking. A waitress, a kind older woman named Marge, who had known Evie for years, bustled over with a pot of coffee. She looked at Bo, then at Evie, sensing the tension. "Another cup, Hon?" Marge asked Evie, eyeing Bo suspiciously. "Yes, please, Marge," Evie said, "and bring him a stack of the blueberry, and a side of bacon. He looks hungry." Bo looked up, startled. His pride warred with his stomach, and his stomach won. "Thank you," he whispered. They sat in silence while Marge poured the coffee. The steam rose between them, a flimsy barrier. "How did you get here?" Evie asked, taking a sip of her coffee. "I know you sold the Aston Martin." "I took the bus," Bo admitted, staring into his black coffee. "From upstate. It takes about 4 hours. Then I walked from this terminal." "And how is the cottage?" Bo let out a short, humorless laugh. "The cottage, it's instructive. The heating system failed in November. Dad tried to fix it and flooded the basement. We're using space heaters, but the wiring is old, so we blow a fuse every time we turn on the microwave." He took a long drink of the coffee, closing his eyes as the warmth hit his chest. "Mom is—" He paused, searching for the word. "She's struggling. She spends most of her days writing letters to people who don't exist anymore, old friends, board members. She thinks if she explains it was all a clerical error, they'll invite her back. Dad just sits by the window. He watches the driveway like he's waiting for the limo to come back. It's pathetic, Evie. Really, truly pathetic." "It's reality," Evie said softly. "Most of the world lives one blown fuse away from freezing Bo. You're just finally visiting the neighborhood." "I know," Bo said. He looked at her, his blue eyes watery. "I'm working, you know. Construction. A guy I knew from prep school, his dad runs a site in Albany. He gave me a job hauling drywall. I make $15 an hour." He held up his hands. They were covered in small cuts and calluses. "I ache every morning. My back feels like it's broken. But it's the first time in my life I've actually earned a paycheck. When I bought my bus ticket today, I paid with my own money. Not the trust fund. Not the credit line. Mine." "That's good, Bo," Evie said, and she meant it. "It builds character." Character. Bo repeated the word like it was a foreign language. "That's what you have. That's what I lacked." He reached into the inner pocket of his denim jacket. For a second, Evie tensed, wondering if he was pulling out a weapon or a subpoena. But he pulled out a small velvet pouch. He placed it on the table and slid it across the Formica surface. Evie didn't touch it. She knew what was inside. "I can't keep this," Bo said. "The ring. I know it's not the big diamond my mother wanted me to buy. I know it was the budget option because I was too scared to ask Dad for more money for a girl he didn't respect. But it's the only thing I have left that connects us." Evie looked at the velvet pouch. It looked small and sad against the napkin holder. "Why are you giving it back?" she asked. "Because I realized something." Bo said, his voice cracking. "When I saw your picture in the paper, when I read about how you built Centurion alongside your father, how you ran the board meetings in secret, I realized I was in love with a woman I never even tried to know. I was in love with Evie the archivist, because she was safe, because she made me feel big. But the real you, the woman who took down my family with a single meeting, she's out of my league. She always was." He leaned forward, desperation creeping into his tone. "Evie that night at the Pierre. I think about it every night. I hear my mother's voice calling you a gold digger, and I hear my own silence. That silence is the loudest thing in my life now. I was a coward. I chose the inheritance over the girl, and in the end, I lost both." The food arrived. Marge set down the steaming plate of pancakes. Bo looked at them, but he didn't eat. He just looked at Evie, waiting for a verdict. "Is there—" He swallowed hard. "Is there any version of this story where we start over? Not the Kensingtons and the Harts. Just Bo and Evie. I'm changing. I really am. I could be the man you wanted me to be." Evie looked at him. She saw the sincerity in his eyes. She believed him. Suffering had stripped away the varnish and left a human being underneath. But she also remembered the feeling of standing alone in that ballroom while he refilled his scotch. She remembered the way he had looked at the floor when his mother called her trash. "Bo," Evie said gently, "I believe you are changing, and I think one day you're going to be a decent man, maybe even a good one." She pushed the dossier aside and leaned in. "But you broke something that can't be fixed with an apology or a construction job. Trust isn't a renewable resource. You showed me who you were when the stakes were high. You showed me that I was disposable." "I was scared," Bo whispered. "I know," Evie said. "But I need a partner who is brave. I need someone who stands beside me when the wolves come, not someone who feeds me to them to save himself." She reached out and placed her hand on the velvet pouch. She didn't open it. She slid it back across the table toward him. "Evie, I can't take it," Bo protested, tears finally spilling over his lashes. "I don't want your charity." "It's not charity," Evie said firmly. "It's severance." She stood up, pulling her coat around her. "Sell the ring, Bo. It's a 1/4 carat good clarity. It should bring in about $400 at a pawn shop. That will buy enough heating oil to get the cottage through February. Don't let your parents freeze. Whatever they did, they're still your parents, and you have a responsibility to them." Bo stared at the pouch, his hand trembling as he covered it. "You're really not coming back?" he asked, his voice barely audible over the diner noise. "No," Evie said. She looked down at him one last time. "The Evie you knew doesn't exist anymore. She died at the Pierre Hotel. I'm someone else now." She reached into her purse and pulled out a $50 bill. She placed it on the table. "Eat your pancakes, Bo. They really are the best in the state." Evie turned and walked away. She didn't look back. She didn't want to see him weeping over a plate of blueberry pancakes. She didn't want to see the ghost of the man she had loved. She pushed through the glass doors and stepped out into the biting cold. The air felt clean, sharp. A sleek black Bentley was idling at the curb. Frank, her head of security, and driver stepped out immediately to open the rear door. "Everything all right, boss?" Frank asked, glancing at the diner window. Evie settled into the warm leather seat. She looked out the tinted window at the grey skyline of New York City rising in the distance. She felt a weight lift off her chest, a final tether snapping. The archive was closed. The debt was paid. "Everything is perfect, Frank," Evie said, a small, genuine smile playing on her lips. "Take me to the office. We have work to do." As the car pulled away, merging into the traffic, Evie didn't look in the rearview mirror. She looked forward toward the city that was hers to shape, leaving the Kensingtons where they belonged, in the past. The Kensingtons learned a brutal lesson that day. Never judge a book by its cover, especially when that book owns the bank that holds your mortgage. They mistook kindness for weakness and silence for submission, never realizing that the quietest person in the room is often the one holding all the cards. Evie didn't just get revenge. She got justice, proving that true worth has nothing to do with the label on your clothes and everything to do with the integrity of your soul. If you enjoyed this story of tables turning and righteous karma, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Share this video with someone who needs a reminder that humility is a virtue, and don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Thanks for watching.